Welcome back to OpenLine. We are talking about prison sentencing reform. We have with us Reverend Jeannie Alexander. She's the director of No Exceptions Prison Collective. There's a push to lower, or I guess allow probation earlier. We have, as we've talked about, life sentences. Life sentence with the possibility of parole after 51 years is essentially a life sentence. And what you're talking about is going to what some other states have done, lower it. Life with parole, a possibility of parole after, say, 25 years.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually talking about going back to exactly what Tennessee has historically done and re-implementing our 1989 sentencing structure.
All right, so let's go to Marilyn, who has been waiting on the phone. Hello, Marilyn.
Yes.
Go right ahead. What's on your mind?
Yes. My son was murdered in 2006, violent murder, and the person that killed him is one of the people that you're talking about that was given life, 51 years. Okay. Your studies that you say that have been done, those studies, do they incorporate or consider all the people that have done violent crimes that have gotten lesser years and they come out and repeat crimes and have to go right back in prison shortly after they've been released? Is that statistics in with the other studies? Also, question, the bill that's being proposed here, does that mean that the people that are already sentenced, their sentences is going to be changed to the new sentencing guideline? How is that supposed to work? Because if that's the way it's supposed to work, then I don't think that's a good idea. Also, one last thing. You talk about we in Tennessee are the only state around in this area that has those guidelines. What's the crime rate in those other states around us? Is our crime rate better than theirs? Because I can't see you slapping somebody on the hand for 25 years for killing somebody violently is going to deter crime. I think the long sentences, it will deter crime. And if we have to pay for it, we just have to pay for it.
All right. Marilyn, thank you for your call. Do you want to begin to take those there?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you, Marilyn. I do appreciate you calling in, and I am incredibly sorry for what has happened to your son. No one thinks that people should not be held accountable for their actions. I certainly don't believe that. And you really raise a good point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So if we're looking at the statistics around violent crime, you know, are we looking at all violent crime? What are we focused on? What do those statistics actually look like? Specifically, what we are looking at is first-degree murder. And what we know across the country, the federal government has looked at this, the Federal Bureau of Statistics, law schools have done longitudinal studies for over a decade looking at this, is that for first-degree murder, that is the lowest recidivism rate of any population. And in fact, if we were to go back to our 89 sentencing structure, that would actually help lower the recidivism rate in the state of Tennessee. Murder is an absolutely terrible crime. I am not debating that. I absolutely understand that. But what we are saying is the reality is the average person who commits a first-degree murder is going to be a male between the ages of about 16 and 27. And we know that they absolutely age out of crime. So, like we were talking earlier, that person who goes in at 19 years old, who in a very particular situation or after a psychotic episode, some sort of psychotic break, that is not unusual. Whatever the circumstances were, by the time that person is 44, that is not the violent person, or the person, actually what I would say, that's not the person who committed that crime, because the other thing that we also see in the statistics, it is not unusual at all for a young male who has committed the crime of first-degree murder to have never had a criminal record before. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but that's not unusual, that it is very situational, and we know that that person does not reoffend. And so we are not taking a broader look at all violent crime. That's not what we're working on. That's not what we're advocating for. We are looking at this very particular crime. We are looking at first-degree murder because it is so unique and because it does have the lowest recidivism rate.
And they're I'm sure, I feel like what she might be getting at is sometimes when there is a murder, prosecutors, police, whatever, will say, look at this person's rap sheet. He's been arrested multiple times, and yet he was out here on the street. What I think you're saying is, in that rap sheet, there probably isn't a past murder. I mean, that would be highly unlikely. And if that's the case, then something maybe broke down if they were back on the street. Yeah, so what she's saying is, what do you say about that? How does this impact that concern?
Right, exactly. This goes into mitigating circumstances. Why it is so important to have the option there to consider the circumstances around a particular murder, around a crime, why they occurred, and why we should have an option other than life without parole. If you have someone with a rap sheet that's a mile long, under chronic felons and offenders, they're going to get an LWOP anyway, or life without parole. So that's not what we're talking about. Those individuals, by and large, they're not, those are exactly the folks that you're probably going to be able to prove the aggravating circumstances for, and they're not going to come up under the sentence.
She also asked, would this, all right, so let's say you get this reform, what about the people that were sentenced under that, the person that murdered her family member? Would it be retroactive? What, how would that work?
Right, and the answer to that, and I understand, I heard exactly what she said, but the answer to that is yes, and there are a couple of reasons why. Number one, if we've come to a realization in the state, again, that looks like vengeance. When someone was not given a life without parole sentence, right? Yes, we are angry, right? And a community is hurt by that. But the question is, does it rise to the level of life without parole? And if we recognize those aggravating circumstances were not proven, I would say this is a mistake. This was a mistake made by the Tennessee General Assembly in 1995. There is precedent of this before in Tennessee. In the 1980s, we passed the Felony X laws, which basically did the exact same thing. But the state legislature recognized fairly early on, this is untenable. It's untenable from a cost perspective. It doesn't make sense necessarily from the recidivism perspective. And they repealed those Felony X laws, and they did it retroactively. And I understand that that is going to be the objection from some victims' rights groups.
And that's going to be tough if you have, Marilyn standing up there talking about her family member who was killed. That's going to, would it be easier or quicker to pass this if you just did it going forward and you didn't try and change what has already happened?
It may be, except that what we know is we need comprehensive reform. We know that other states have passed that retroactively as well. If we are willing to admit that we have made a mistake, then we have made a mistake. And I will say this, and I say this with all compassion and in all honesty. 25 years in a Tennessee prison, which again, they're not getting out at 25. You don't get out your first chance. So it's actually going to be more like 30, 35, 38 years in a Tennessee prison is not a slap on the wrist. It destroys people's families. And I know that a victim's family member would say, my family was destroyed. And the response to that, if we are looking to restore our communities at all and find healing from people, is not to continue to multiply the harm. We need to find real solutions. We need to find real solutions for victims. The restorative justice movement was a victims movement first. And we also, everyone has a story. And we need to hear those. I would think that what we would want as a society, particularly in the South where we're in the middle of the Bible Belt, we should want to understand why something occurred. We should want to understand if someone can be brought back into the community, if they can be restored. If I can just say, there's this story in the Gospels of the Gerasene demoniac, right, who was violent and is chained up in the tombs and is healed, and then is able to leave the tombs. Like what we're saying is, if you are no longer a threat, if you have been transformed and healed, we're really angry, and so you're going to stay in the tombs. That's not moral.
And her last question, the crime rate in other states. So you look around, you said other states don't have this life with parole after 51 years. What's the crime? Is there a difference in the crime rate? And stats are so, I always question these things, but that's her question.
Yeah, they're pretty comparable, but the reality is we did not, and what she's getting to there, Tennessee did not enact a 51-year life sentence because the crime was out of control here, and this was the only response we could give. Tennessee enacted a 51-year sentence because of sloppy legislation. And what I mean by that is that in some of the other states, when they increased their sentences, they adjusted their sentencing down first because they realized they were going to have these impossible sentences. We don't have the longest life with parole sentence in the country because Tennessee is the most violent state in the country and because everyone is out of control here. That's not the issue. The issue is just a quick fix to take federal money.
All right, let's go to Mary. Hello, Mary, are you there?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Hi, Miss Alexandra. My name is Mary Manin, and I'm trying to get my son got a 25-year sentence for Judge Dozier, and I think it was a little too stiff a punishment since I was home at the time when they said this crime was committed, and I told the gospel truth if ever I told it. And I was raped one time, and the justice system ruled it as a simple assault, and I fought them in for 5 hours, and I felt just really betrayed, and my son got 25 years. I do not think it's right. I'm a poor girl, have no money for a judge, you know, for a lawyer or nothing. For a while, my husband spent lots of money, but now I'm single and on my own, and this is mentally, Homer's been in there 20 years, and this has really took a toll on my life. And I went to one of your meetings, even though I didn't understand it, and I think you're a super nice lady, and I don't think my son really deserved 25 years since I was home at the time. They said this crime was committed, and beyond a shadow of doubt, as I'm sitting in this chair, God strike me dead, I told the truth. When my son was before Judge Dozier, and I'm not mad at him, but I don't know how to help him. I was thinking about going to the governor and ask for clemency. You know, I don't know if it would do any good or not, but I believe if I could tell my testimony to the governor, you know, my son deserves to be out. He's been in there 20 years, and when he gets out, what kind of life is he going to have left with me? Maybe 5 years. Maybe I'll live to be 75. And I'm thankful to God for River Bend Prison, where Homer is, that there's such a sweet guards out there and everybody. Well, but I think my Homer deserves a better chance than he got.
What age was he when he went in?
And I think you're a super nice lady.
Well, that's. Can you say what age he went in? How old was he?
He went in I think he was 19, and the girl was 20, and he's been in there 20 years, and he got 25 years with no parole.
Do you know this case?
I know.
Do you remember?
I know her son.
Do you want to tell us what it was for? What he was convicted of?
Well, he kind of didn't want me to, but I feel like I have to tell her. Homer was accused of rape, and I was home at the time in my room, awake in my bedroom. When Homer came out to call his father to ask could he get some Xanax pills, and I'd left a paring knife and a butter knife on the bed, and to my knowledge, he didn't know it. And when the police were coming, I was in the floor thinking I was going to be raped. And 3 guys were kicking in my door, trying to get into us. So I told Homer to jump over the banister and run and get us help because I thought the police wouldn't get here to save me. But I seen her when she went out because I was in such a trauma. I forgot the whole incident.
All right. Well, let's talk about. I appreciate your story.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary.
All right. So that's not murder.
No.
You said there was something about 11 crimes. Is that crime fit in?
That was one. It was only 85%. So yeah, the work that we're doing won't affect Homer's case. But I think one of the things that she brings to the show this evening, and this is also reality, and we are just going to start having to have this conversation as a society, is when I said earlier that crime impacts everyone. It's also hell for the family of the person who committed that act or who was convicted of that act. And for those people, you have to understand, they're children. Homer is not a monster to his mother, and that's what actually compelled me into this work and really called me into it. This as an activist and as a reverend. As the reality was, every day when I went into work at Riverbend, I was not surrounded by monsters. The majority of the minimum security prisoners who just wanted to find some way to live, who had been in 20 years like Homer, had been convicted of, I worked with a lot of folks who had been convicted of first-degree murder. And as long as we keep people behind a wall and you can't see them, they can be reduced to their crime. But human beings are complex and they're dynamic and they will continue to evolve and they will continue to change. And so that person you have locked up at 41 is not the same person who came in 19. And we need to have comprehensive conversations, and our policy decisions need to be made by talking to all stakeholders.
What was your position when you went in as a prison chaplain? Did you feel like you would come out an activist, or did you not expect that at all? You thought you were just going to go in and minister? I mean, did it change you a lot, or were you already going in thinking that you might go down this road?
So I went in already very convinced. And remember, I was an attorney before. I mean, really convinced that we have a serious problem with mass incarceration in this country. We have a prison industrial complex that is fueled by money, and that we are out of step with the rest of the world. I mean, unless we want to become Saudi Arabia, and I really don't think that's our goal. I hope it's not our goal. You know, that we're very out of step. And so I believe that coming in, and I also went in as someone who knows people change and transform, and that people deserve to have an advocate, you know. I was not prepared for how radically that would transform me. And as a person of faith, I was absolutely convinced that I could not live into that faith authentically and not take on a fight like this that's really hard. Either people are redeemable, and we can't give someone a second chance. And for those of us who profess a Christian faith, either we believe what the Gospels say or we don't. Now, as someone who does, I don't have the ability to simply follow some of the old laws. The words
well, you have taken
meaning.
On a hard fight. I mean, politicians, it's hard to get elected saying, let's be less tough on crime. I mean, they walk around saying, let's be tough on crime.
I think that whole narrative, first of all, I do believe the national conversation has shifted. And I think what we need to be talking about is, let's be honest about crime. And let's be honest about what we mean when we say justice. If what we're going to do is enact a system and adopt policies that are wholly based on vengeance or have that effect, that's very frightening, I think, for our future as a country. And I think that's why we've seen so much reform in other areas.
All right, we're going to take a break. If you're on the line, hold on. I promise we'll get to your call. If you want to call in, there's the number 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.